This is Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I'm Diane Hansen, management consultant, with me co-host Christine Salvo, therapist, certified mediator, and certified hypnotherapist.
Good morning, everyone. Hello.
Good morning, everybody. And when we have a great guest, we like to have that guest back. And so we have Kevin Hancock, author of The Seventh Power, One CEO's Journey into Shared Leadership. He's the CEO of one of the oldest lumber companies in the U.S., founded in 1848. In 2010, he acquired a rare voice disorder, which impacted his ability to speak. By studying voice marginalized communities, he discovered there were ways people could regain their voice by seeing the purpose of voice clearly. His voice condition became a gift to spread the message about creating a culture of being heard. Here's how you can encourage this culture within your organization: by increasing awareness, awakening to purpose, honoring individual sacredness and value, and of course, listening to Kevin today. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Diane, Christine, it's so great to be back with you. I'm almost giddy just to be on your show again.
Miss you.
Yes. After we had our last show with you, Kevin, it was not missed that you are the CEO of one of the oldest lumber companies in the U.S. 1848 is no joke. I mean, that is a long-standing company. And I was so interested in delving into today's topic with you, and that's, how do you take a company with so much history, so much legacy, so much to build off of, multi-generational, and not only move it through the innovations and changes necessary to sustain business over time, but how do you do that in a way that is inclusive, in a way that informs all through the change management process, and also honors the legacy at the same time? So that's such a mouthful, but I know we have a lot to discuss. And where I'd just love to start is, take me back to 1848. What was the structure of your company back then?
Yeah, so in 1848, so we're talking about prior to the Civil War.
Wow.
Shortly after Maine became a state, 6 generations ago in my family, there would have been in the small town of Casco, on a little known river coming out of Pleasant Lake, a mill of concrete block and wood that processed lumber. And you would have seen men cutting trees by hand. You would have seen horses and oxen dragging trees to waterways. You would have seen logs floated down rivers, none of which, to your point, do we do anymore. If we stuck with oxen and water-powered mills, we would have been done a long time ago.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So, what does it look like to go from, and maybe just to get an idea of operations today now, and just look at that span of a gap. So what do operations today look like?
Yeah, so today, to put it in context, we probably produce more lumber in a year than we produced in the first 100 years of the company's operations, just to put it in context. And that's done in a very sustainable, renewable way. The forests in Maine are super healthy and growing. But today, if you went into one of our mills, you'd see a tremendous amount of technology optimizing computer software that learns on its own, that does very complex tasks like grading and sorting lumber. So while the raw material is the same, really everything about the business is completely different today, as you would expect. And we have a saying in our company that really ties to the topic at hand today, which is simply this: always changing to remain the same. So what that means to us is what remains the same? Your values, your kind of core values about people and quality and your mission and doing good in the world, that remains the same. But in order to stay relevant, everything about how your industry functions, as you know, any industry is constantly up for grabs, and you've got to continuously be reinventing yourself before, as the old saying goes, your competitors do. So this is not something that just companies that live a long time have to do. This is really something in this day and age that every company, everywhere, has to have the ability to do, which is to constantly remake and reinvent itself.
That is so important, like always changing to remain the same. So remain the same honors the legacy, it honors the purpose behind the company, it honors why 6 generations back that company was started. But it's the always changing part that can sometimes get people ruffled feathers. And of course, you don't necessarily have anyone even alive who was there on day one now. But how do you handle change in a company where, maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago, there's still someone working for your organization? Who is your longest standing employee? How many years have they been there?
Yeah, that torch just passed. One gentleman retired and a new gentleman holds that torch. It's actually a plaque that moves around, and he's been with us 45 years. So he would have seen the company, to your example, to put it in context, pre-computer. I've worked for the company for 30 years, and I remember, like, as a kid being around the company, and there were no computers. Every single thing about the business was done by hand. So in a single generation, the change has been amazing. I was counting, thinking about this show coming up, the number of critical events just in my lifetime that were going to be the quote unquote end of our company. The first was when my dad died in 1997, and we transitioned from a 5th generation to a 6th. That is a critical moment in a family business's life that companies don't often make it through. But beyond that, when globalization came along, everyone wrote about how that would be the end of our company as a manufacturer. When the internet came along, they wrote about how that would be the end of our company as a retailer. So I've lived through in my career 3 or 4 events that people were sure companies like ours wouldn't survive. And in the end, they each made our company stronger. It's really, as you know, how you think about change. And if you can see whatever you want to see in change. Change is coming, and you either can embrace it or you can kind of freeze up in the face of it.
Yeah,
I think that's so impressive that you've gone through so many, right? Like the sky is falling, and everybody's running. And in those moments, it feels very real. It seems very tangible, like the end is near and these negative outcomes. So this adaptability of being able to kind of like go through these difficult times, let it suck for a minute, but then keep going. Do you think that's kind of been part of your formula?
I do. I actually love how you said that, Christine. Someone, at a business school, they probably call it resilience, but I actually love letting it suck for a while because that's what it feels like. I would say that, our greatest growth moments have also been our toughest moments, where you're really forced to confront the way the world is moving. Now, all of this really comes back, of course, to listening, which is a critical short-term and long-term skill. If you listen to customers and employees, you're gonna hear the change that's coming. And the key, I think, is to try to keep up with it in small, constant increments rather than stick with what you're doing for 30 years and then try to reinvent everything. That's probably difficult. But if you have a culture of continuous change, which most companies would aspire to have, it's more like being in the current. You're constantly moving. Our company is going to be different next week than it was last week. And over a period of years, being different every week wakes you up in a very different place than you would have been just a few years ago. You just got to constantly be reinventing yourself.
That reinvention is so important. Do you ever run into team members who are, we don't need to change that. We don't need to fix that. It's not broken.
That's interesting. I think that a decade or 2 or 3 ago, that would have been more common. I have a sense today that the world, the speed with which humanity is evolving, everybody recognizes that it's fast and that nothing about the present moment is static or secure. So really today, I think if you want to be in the workplace, in a leading role, you've got to really welcome that change and embrace it. I don't see a lot of people resisting it at our company, but again, I think this all comes back to corporate culture and what the culture of the company is, and ours is really very much about continuous improvement at a local level, in which everybody is being asked to be a change agent, to keep figuring out how to do what you do better.
Mm-hmm. Yes. When everyone is asked to be a change agent, then there's an ownership of the change. This change is going to help me do my job better. This change is going to help the company make more money. I have a vested interest in this change. Therefore, the buy-in is so much greater amongst them and the teams that they manage and run. That makes total sense.
Right. I'm glad that came up, Diane, and I hadn't really thought about it until you just said it, but you have a good sense of the transformation of my own personal leadership style. A couple decades ago, I would have been all about, as the CEO, coming up with the ideas and pushing them out through the system. That did not work very well. There were a lot of bumps along the way. And the biggest problem with that, as you know and pointed out, is no one but me really owned the ideas to begin with. Now, in our new model, this is really why I think it's been so smooth for us. In our new model, we're trying not to drive the change centrally, but to drive it locally and to share the leadership responsibility for change. So now what happens is I travel around our company is I can't keep up with the innovation. It's not coming to me for approval. It's just happening. And the other thing I've really seen in that dispersed leadership model, in summary, is that we make better decisions when the people who do the work are central in doing the corporate strategy reinvention. You end up making better choices that people own the responsibility for.
Oh, I can so agree with that. I've had some careers in my lifetime where it was like, do these people even know what I do? Like that's not even practical change. That's like going to take more time to do it that way than to do it this way. And because it comes down from corporate, then the supervisors are like, hey, I know it doesn't make sense. I'm just middle management. Don't shoot the messenger, and then they're that frustration build. So I just love what you said about how the innovation is happening so fast you can't keep up with it, and that they're not coming to you for approval. That's huge. I mean, that's really check your ego at the door kind of stuff. And in management and ownership and being a CEO, like that's really difficult to do because some people really kind of look at this as my baby, my business, and really kind of opening your hands in this way of like, no, do it, man, if it makes sense. That's amazing.
That's such an important point, Christine. I think ego is central to this. Again, earlier in my career, when I really wanted to prove myself or my ego in hindsight, I wanted to come up with the ideas because I wanted to really build my ego that way. It was only when I let go of that that our decision making got a lot better. Now, I mean, I can honestly say now, I'm not even interested in the credit for any of this. My interest level in that is zero. And that is such a liberating feeling. All I want is for the company to have good outcomes out of respect for the past and for the benefit of the people who work there now. And when you shift away from ego towards outcomes, it gets a lot simpler.
I love that. The shift from ego to outcomes. And it's true. If you look at the outcomes not achieved and what got in the way, most of the time it's, well, there's those two swings of ego. It's too good to or not good enough to. Our company is not good enough to make this change, or we're too good to do this. We have to stay with this. So when we take the ego completely out of it, you really do free up the free flow of change, of innovation, of excitement to evolve.
Right. And I love talking to you both right now. Reminds me of why I love talking to you both. But because you keep things simple. What messes up change? Well, let's start at a simple level. Bad ideas mess up change. So if you come up with an idea that's just not going to work, to Christine's point, it's really dead on arrival. And lots of companies exert lots of energy on ideas that really don't have a future to begin with because they didn't come from the source, the people doing the work. And then the second big thing that can mess up change is that you don't have authentic buy-in. So you don't have authentic dialogue, and you can't have authentic buy-in, and the odds of the change even heading in the right direction are diminished before you even start. Making good choices is a critical, simple component of change success. And that has got to come from the people doing the work and your customers. So it's really about learning to listen and empower and make it safe for people to say what they think and for them to make the changes that they know have a high probability of making the company better. It's really disseminating the strategic evolution of the company as something that everybody's going to participate in.
Beautiful. So I have a question for you. When we kind of started this conversation, it was about transition and transition in a time of fear. So when we're really looking at this kind of letting change happen, giving people ownership, checking the ego at the door, it can present a little bit more difficulty when we're scared. You know what I mean? Like when things are going well, it's like, hey man, yeah, management, you do this, you take ownership. But when we're in those times when you talked about we weren't supposed to survive at least 5 to 6 times, that's that time. Those are those critical moments where I really feel like it's like trust and faith come in, where if this is your model, you better stick to it, right? You don't get to just do it when things are easy, kind of like marriage. Like, hey, we didn't just said when time was we're good. We said all the time, right? Like my couple session I had today, I said, you guys said I do, right? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, when are you going to start doing it? Like, then do it. If you said I do it. And they just kind of looked at me like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I guess we did make that commitment and we should probably do some things. So I really want to, like, for our listeners, get some advice there from you of, how do you keep this open heart, open mind, trust and faith when the waters aren't smooth?
Right. Great question again. What I love about business is it's really a microcosm for life. And I think when you look at work in the context of life, things get a lot clearer. So I think it starts with recognizing that life itself is not static. We all intuitively know this, but it's easy to forget. You're born, you grow up, you come of age, you work through a career, the planet's spinning, it's moving through space, everything's changing. That is what it means to be alive. So you've got to start with the right orientation. And also, to your question, Christine, what it means to be alive is you are going to be challenged, and you are going to have setbacks, and you are going to have hardship. You can, that is unavoidable. And when it comes your way, you've got to really, I think, see it as life, authentic life, and see it as the potential for growth. You know, I really learned this lesson, as you know, through my voice disorder. When I lost a good part of my voice back in 2010, that turned out to be a rebirth moment of crazy growth for me. And it came out of what literally was a medical disorder. It's out of the, it sounds cliche, but there's no light without the darkness. And I think we need to remember that at work. And it does tend, those dark moments are really invitations to test ourselves and grow.
Yeah.
It is, it just calls back to a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is, creating the motivation to change, the process to change, and really realizing that dissatisfaction with status quo is the key to change, and that dissatisfaction comes from the darkness. That dissatisfaction comes from, this has just really gotten gross. We're hemorrhaging money, we're hemorrhaging time, we are just in a place of yuck. Or maybe it's the external. Maybe you look at the political, economic, social, and technological landscape, and it's falling apart. But really, the power comes from within to change. So when you have a strong culture like your company does, Kevin, it really provides the glue that gets through the hard times. And I think, speaking to our listeners from a values standpoint, your personal values are the glue that holds you to those choices in the times of darkness. Your values are the flashlight. So what are some of the values, Kevin, of your organization that keep that light on in the darkness?
Well, you really touched on maybe the biggest one there, Diane, which for me is that change is an inside job. I love what you just said. Every dark period I've gone into turned out not to be a moment for me to change others or for me to change an external company. It was really a moment for me to change who I was. That's what had to change. I had to become something different to meet what was wanting to manifest. When you think about change that way, it's really liberating and empowering. It would be overwhelming for me. We have 565 people on our team to think about how to change them. I'm just not even wired that way. When all I focus on is how I need to change to manifest what we need to become. Getting myself right is pretty much a full-time job. And that's really, at the end of the day, what is change? It's one human at a time becoming something a bit different. And we each need to focus on ourselves, and it can be most difficult to do that when the external disruption seems the greatest. So you've got to really have the discipline to look inward. I would just say this quickly, and I've talked about this a lot before. I've never seen a weakness or challenge in our company that I couldn't trace back to me. Something I did or didn't do or didn't become that allowed that to become what it was. And once you see change as an inside job, it really simplifies things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And for those business leaders listening to this show today, I like your analogy of tracing back the issues to, what is that top line? What's that top line message? What's that top line decision that was made? What does that come from the top line, and how does the top impact the bottom? The change may have happened at the bottom that was a deficit, but what was the indicator from the C-level, the indicator from the leadership level that this is our path? And so could you give a kind of an example of something that happened at that bottom line that you traced up to you?
Yes, we had a moment a couple of years ago at one of our stores with one of our teams in which we were just so not our best selves. We were actually relocating the site, and we did not engage the team as participants in what we were doing, how we were doing it, when we were doing it. And as a result, they didn't have any ownership of it. And it didn't go well. And we brought the group together, 5 or 6 of us, and all I did at that meeting was talk about what I hadn't done or could have done to have helped create a different outcome. Did not make a comment about what anyone else hadn't done or could have done. And organically, we just went around the room, and that's all that happened in the meeting. It was 6 people self-examining their own role in a really safe way. And we just learned, didn't make the moment where we messed up great, but we just learned so much about what we would do differently the next time. And it also really helped us apologize, which is such an important part of change as well, because you're not always going to get it right. You're not going to be perfect. And you've got to be willing to step right to the front as a leader and say, I messed this up. We didn't do this right, and look your team in the eye and say, I'm really sorry. I totally can see how this impacted you and how we created some chaos that was unnecessary. That's on us. You've got to be willing to own your mistakes.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Now, that's something I would like to see, honestly, is a group of CEOs and businesses and managers sitting around, taking accountability, responsibility, and then working on the plan. That's next level. That's next level personal responsibility and authenticity and integrity. That's really beautiful stuff. And thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you. It is important that that ability to really reflect internally inside oneself and take that full responsibility. And in my critical opportunity method, which I created in my master's program at SC, that's part of the upward spiral process to change, is that you first recognize what needs to be changed, you remove the ego from it, and at that point you're ready to emotionally process or mourn the fallen expectation. But you can't do that without accountability. If you're not in a non-place of accountability, your emotional processing is going to look like victimization, and it's going to look like blame. So I love how we touched on all of those aspects today. And Kevin, if people want to know more about you, your company, your book, where would they go?
So the best place would be my website, which is www.thebusinessofsharedleadership.com. You'll be able to find the show there someday when it hit our last show and all kinds of other resources, that you can contact me there, and I'd love to hear from people.
Great. That's www.thebusinessofsharedleadership.com.
Correct.
And thank you once again for being on our show. It was an absolute pleasure.
Time flies when I'm with you both, so thanks for having me. I loved it.
Yes, beautiful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. Lovely to have you again.
This has been Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I'm Diane Hansen, management consultant.
And I'm Christine Salvo, licensed marriage and family therapist, advanced certified mediator, and certified hypnotherapist. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. This is Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication.